friends, it's Jeff. We're celebrating here at Around the Circle. Our Start Here podcast, which helps folks find their type, has been the #1 Enneagram podcast on iTunes all year. This podcast channel just passed 6,000 subscribers and 2 million downloads, and we're closing in on 1,000 free members at aroundthecircle.org. More than this is the 1-year anniversary of our book. Around the Circle is out on Amazon. Kindle version is just $9. Audio version has all kinds of extras, or you can get the uber fancy print version, which has our mistyping guide. But more than this, we're moving to want to connect with you more. Real Enneagram work. We have been very aware recently. Real Enneagram work often requires real conversations. And so as we enter the next season, we're going to focus on creating more online panels and workshops. So this month, we're talking with members about coping style and how each of the types solves problems on Mondays. Our second Saturday workshop will begin hitting a new topic in August when we have 30 or 40 people assemble. And every Tuesday night, we continue to have our reading room, which presently we are wrapping up Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart. It's on emotion and exploring how emotions overlap with the Enneagram. Also next month, and this is new, I'm going to begin speaking exclusively with men about their experience of the Enneagram. We don't often hear from men reflecting on their inner lives in these spaces, but those who do engage the Enneagram often have extraordinary stories to tell. So I'm going to try and get men together, talk shop. So if you want to connect, very easy. Go to aroundthecircle.org. Sign up for a free membership, and you will get all of our announcements, all the links to all of our free stuff. Or if it's time for you and your family to do some serious work, become a $20 member. All the links to our online classes and conversations will open up for you, and we would love to meet you. That's what I got for this month. I'm Jeff. May all good things be yours. All right, friends, this is Around the Circle. I'm Jeff Cook. I'm with the Dr. Sammy Greenberg and Lyndsey Fraser. Welcome, ladies.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thrilled to have you. This is this is the third or fourth time that I've been talking to the combination of y'all. We're talking about Enneagram and the sex life of some pairings today. To set this up, you guys want to give a quick bio on what most of your professional work looks like?
Sure. I guess we could talk maybe about individually and jointly, because we do a lot of collaboration, which is why we're here together. But I'll just introduce myself first. So I'm a sexuality researcher primarily by training, and my research is on sexuality and the Enneagram, which most people know if they've heard me before, but if they don't, it was on the overlap of Enneagram type and instinct with patterns of sexual desire and expression. And I'm also an Enneagram coach specializing in sexuality, intimacy, and relationships.
And my name is Lyndsey Fraser, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a certified sex therapist, an IAA accredited professional. And I have a private practice in South Minneapolis where I specialize in relationships and sexuality. And I have been in practice, I am going into my 14th year, which feels kind of wild to me. It doesn't feel like it's been 14 years.
Come on. What's your favorite thing about the work that you all do?
Well, I'd say about us working together. So we do a lot of collaboration where we teach together, we create resources together, because we get kind of the scientific side and the therapy side when we combine our powers. And I'd say one of the great things about our work together is how complementary it is, how much complementarity there is between Lyndsey's expertise and my expertise, and how to round out sexuality and the Enneagram, you really need both. And even in terms of types that we're really particularly good at working with, she's good at some and I'm good at some, and together we're kind of good at all of them. So I say in terms of working with Lyndsey, that's my favorite thing.
What say you, Lyndsey?
I think, with working with Sam, I think what's really interesting is Sam and I both were independently doing this work separately. I actually didn't even know that there were other people doing the work. And we ended up getting connected sort of through an interdisciplinary team of other people that were doing the work as well. But there was something really beautiful about, like, I just love, like, Sam and I together, it's like where one of us are weak, the other one's strong. And so it's kind of this complementary skill. We have a few shared weaknesses as well, which are our growth points that we are working on, and things like that as well. But it's like we know what those are. And I think one of the things that's been really great is that it's very like transparent and a vulnerable and like intimate relationship as a friends as well as professionally in what we do. And so I think it's just a really beautiful blend. And I feel like when we first met, I was like, oh, your research is showing all of the things I actually already see in my office, but I didn't have any of the research to back up the actual things that were happening with clients. But I had this, I had all this information and all these patterns and all these things that I was seeing. But it's just lovely when you have like the other person on the other end having done that research to kind of back up what I actually see. And even that vice versa, right? I'm showing that the research that she's doing is seen in the therapeutic office, and that there is, a pattern there that is happening. And it's just this beautiful blend of sort of having both. And honestly, I think you need to really have both. To be able to have more of a holistic view of what's going on. And I was a therapist before I did Enneagram work. And I think you were kind of both, were you not, Sam?
Yeah, I always say I'm a research methodologist before I'm anything, because that's what I did first. I did research methodology for sexuality programs, but I was doing coaching already, kind of therapeutic coaching already, before we combined forces. But with Lyndsey, your depth of experience, it really helps me. When I get stuck, I often will go to Lyndsey and say, I have this couple with this dynamic. I just don't know what to do with it. And she always knows what to do. So you really bring the wisdom, I'd say.
If I was going to describe 4s, 5s, and 9s, the withdrawn types, one of the things that would stand out to me is that they want to get their feelings and thoughts solid before moving into their bodies. And that feels like a great way to approach human sexuality itself. That so often in our culture, the physical comes first. We're moving into that space when thinking about sex and sexuality. Whereas I imagine the most foundational elements of being a healthy person, having a healthy couple, would lie much more on the emotional life and thought life prior to physical interactions. Am I wrong there?
I mean, not at all, right? I mean, one of the things that I think that we forget about sexuality is, you're right, so many people put the actual focus on the physical acts and behaviors of sex, but it's like everything that we do is sexuality. So you do have to incorporate the emotional world, the spiritual world, the physical world, as well as, I feel like I'm missing one, the emotional world. And the thing is that we, like what I say is like everything we do is sexuality. And sometimes we only think about the actual physical acts of sex, but it's that opportunity to look at it more holistically. So yes, I would completely agree with that.
Sam always loves when I come with broad questions, sweeping questions, because I need definitions.
Jeff one time just asked me to define sexuality. That was his question. He said, "Can you just define sexuality for me?" Obviously, like, I can't because of what Lyndsey just said. It's like, so many aspects of being.
Does that strike you as a massive, overwhelming question, Lyndsey? Because you know so much about sexuality, does it feel like it's so complicated that it can't get a definition to it?
I mean, how you define sexuality, I think the bigger thing is that all of us have our individual definitions of sexuality. And that, I mean, part of the reason I became a sex therapist, which I was not necessarily fully aware of, but the Enneagram actually highlighted some of the things that I was really trying to hit in my sex therapy practice, is that the way that we approach and think about sexuality is much more individual than a societal message or view or thing that we're shown. And so really what I oftentimes work with couples on is that you have the definition of good enough sex. You have a definition of what that looks like for you. And sometimes that entails physical, sexual behaviors and actions you do. But for some people, it may not actually even be the physical acts of sex, but the way that you look at me, the emotional connection, the tending to, the caring for. It's really those things that we wouldn't do with people that are our friends, right? It's that extra level of intimacy that we have with a romantic partner that we're interested in, or even someone we meet on a one-off chance and we're like excited about, right? But it's such a complex thing to define, as Sam is saying. And I think people try to define it, and like it is this. But the more and more I do this work is that I have so many different definitions of what sexuality would mean for the people that have been in my office. And part of what my role has been is to normalize that for them. And that healthy sexuality can mean many, many different things, from vanilla to super kinky to everything in between.
I'm sure it's the case that when people come to you, you're probably asking open-ended questions of like, why are you here? What's going on in your life? And you're getting a sense of where they are. But for you, what is on your radar first? Like, what are the first things that you actually want to know about as you're engaging those open-ended questions? What pings for you most in those first sessions?
Yeah, mostly, the thing that comes into my office the most frequently is going to be a desire discrepancy. But one of the things that I'll say is that oftentimes it's actually not a desire discrepancy, it's actualization of desire. But no matter who comes into the therapy office, and I believe Sam does a very similar thing in her coaching, I'm going to get the holistic view of what's going on in your life in general. So like I'm going to be having people, tell me about your relationship, how you met, a little bit about your story. How did we get to what your presenting issue is or concern is? So it starts there. That's the first thing I ask everyone that comes in. Even if they're not actually even looking at sexuality issues, but I always ask about sex because not everybody comes to me for sexuality issues. Most of the time they do now because that's my specialty, but not always. And then I'm going to have them start going through different aspects of life. Like, how's your conflict management? How's your communication, your money, household tasks, these kind of like other areas of life. And then some history questions like mental health and chemical use and stuff like that, because you have to have the holistic image to make sure that nothing else is sort of impacting or influencing the sexuality. We don't think about it, but it's like, if you're worried about money, you might not be having a great sex life because you're more worried about that. And so like sometimes I have to address a fight, a money issue or a conflict issue and any of those kinds of things. If somebody came in and the only thing that they had was sex, we do a general intake, look at their family of origin. I do sexual histories, and then we I do trust too. We always look at trust, and then I kind of move in to the sex stuff. So to me, I want to set the platform that like to do sexuality work. Like it's really any other kind of therapeutic work you're going to do. You have to kind of you have to do the kind of like assessment and deep dive into the person's life to fully understand what's going on, to understand what's impacting the sexuality as well.
Do you have anything to add there, Sam, in terms of what pings for you most at the beginning?
Yeah, I'll just add that I work to identify the Enneagram types and instincts of the couple first, because if they don't know, we confirm it. I mean, if they don't know, we explore it. If they do know, we confirm it. And that is because we can know so much about relational dynamics, about values, about priorities, about motive in intimacy and sexuality from just knowing what the type is and just knowing what the instinct is, which is what Lyndsey and I do, is the Enneagram types or instincts as a shorthand for what's going to be your approach to sexuality, what's going to be the way you make meaning about it, what's going to be your ability to actualize desire or not. So finding out the types first really helps me. I don't want to say I'm guessing what the issue is. I'm not. I'm asking the same kind of questions that Lyndsey's asking, but there's lots of people and lots of specific types where they have a hard time articulating what's going on. So once you know the types, you can say things like, hey, well, with something that I see with a lot of my nines is they have a hard time knowing what they like and want. Is that something that goes on for you? And you can get faster progress and help people express with less shame and less embarrassment when you know their type first. So I'll just add that.
I was going to add, I do the same thing, but what's interesting between the difference between Sam and I is people seek Sam out explicitly for the Enneagram. Not everybody does for me. So it's kind of this like, I use the tool, but I'm like, hey, this is the tool I use. I get their Enneagram type, but like it's sort of this like blending of both things to get people more comfortable with sort of using that tool. And I always let people know we can use it as much or as little as you want. Most clients love it. Maybe this is part of my 9 too. I'm like, I'll put it in there a little bit and then I'll pull it back. I'll put it in there a little bit and I pull it back. And then I go kind of more because it will give them so much information about what's happening in the sexuality piece. But I do know for some of my clients, if I go heavy Enneagram right away, they get a little bit like, turned off. So if I know you specifically have seeked me out for that, I'll do very similar to Sam. If you haven't, I delicately start to put it in as we're working and get them kind of bought into it.
I'm going to transition hard to Enneagram here in a second, but as you're painting the picture of you're working with folks, you're focused on sex and intimacy. When talking about like the holistic view of a human being, does sex and intimacy have a place in that? Like, can you speak to where sex and intimacy falls in terms of like a holistic view of just being a human being?
I will always ask about sex, even sort of in that general intake that people are having, because to me, sex is an innate part about who we are as human beings. And I think that what's interesting sort of in the therapeutic field here is even like a lot of the couples therapists that are here where I live in Minneapolis, many of them are uncomfortable talking about sexuality. And a lot of people come into my office having wanted the therapist to ask or the coach to ask if they're working with them. Clients won't bring it in unless you ask them. And so I think it's really essential if you're doing one-on-one work with people, whether it's life coaching or whether it's therapy, individual or couples, that you're asking them about that, because a lot of people want to talk about it, but if they think you're uncomfortable with it, they won't ask about it. But like sex is such an innate part of who we are. We are innately sexual beings, and to like deny that part of ourselves, I think is really unfortunate. And I see it too often sort of in society as a whole, or like in personal growth work that we're doing. Anything you'd add, Sam?
Yes, I often will say, I might have actually even said this before on this podcast, that if you were alone on a desert island for your whole life, you would still be a sexual being. And of course, we have, people on the asexual spectrum and that kind of thing going on. But for the large portion of beings, you're a sexual being, whether you're actualizing that or interacting with others or behaving sexually with others or not. I don't know if Jeff's going to cut this out, but they found that fetuses will masturbate in the womb. So like before birth, we are already sexual. Obviously it's different, sexuality is different in children and babies, but like the idea of a relationship with the body in that way is from even before birth. So, no, I wouldn't say it kind of that it grows out of something. I'd say that it's right there with everything else that makes us alive and makes us human.
Some of the things that you're saying seem to me really core that I would love to touch on. There's on one side the idea of trust. We always look for trust. On the other side, language of shame, embarrassment, uncomfort have come up. Why is it the case that if we're so wired for this, they are also, sexuality is always so tied to that sense of unease at that level? Is there something we're saying there?
I'll say one thing, and then I always like what Lyndsey says about how many people she's met with healthy sexual messaging. But I would say just watch your projection, because like people who were raised and enculturated in religious circles, or even people who weren't, but the society, American society especially, is that way. We assume that everyone, like absolutely everyone, feels shame and embarrassment about sexuality, but actually that's not the case. It's not a given. It's just that a huge percentage of us got super messed up by society and by religious messaging and by our parents.
Working on the idea of trust came up. I'm doing work on this because I think it's a core Enneagram idea. Trust, the word confidence comes from the word with trust. It's confide. Fide is trust. It's a Latin word. There ends up being like when you confide in someone, It is a trusting act. Confidence and confide, you use that idea. It seems to me that there's something about the sexuality that does have that trust element to it with another. You mentioned you can be a sexual person on a desert island, but there is the image of it's more than just yourself, yeah? There is something taking place in our sex lives. Is it not aiming at something like bonding?
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting because yes, you need trust and you need bonding, you need connection, but we also know passion and excitement and desire is sparked by the unknown, and that's a lot of like Esther Perel's work. If you're kind of familiar with some of the work that she's done, so you kind of have both. Like you have to have trust, but also if you have too much, like what I call oxytocin, cozy comfort, long-term relationship, same patterns, not doing much of anything different within that, you could see a little bit less like sexual spark or sexual energy kind of happening within those relationships. And that's why a lot of people end up coming into my office. And so we know it's like you need the unknown to spark desire, but also we have to trust the partner that we're with to want to be, well, again, I mean, this is something where like depends on the instinct because, you know, if we have, or even the Enneagram type, some people might like novelty or the unknown or may not have a, you know, deep trusting relationship because they want to kind of have a sexual experience that feels exciting. So I think it gets complex in that sense as well. I know for myself as a 9 who is social dominant, it is very much about building the trust. I'm slow to build relationships. I want to get to know them. Anybody that I have been sexual with, we have had, you know, a kind of longer term connected relationship because sex has been a very sacred thing for me. But that's for me. And I will have clients that will mention very different things than what I just mentioned. And that's where I think like our own biases can come into play as far as like how we view and think about sexuality. I'm just one type, one instinct. Also, many other people that are 9s would view and think about it different, the exact same instinct as me. And so I think it's complex. It was interesting, like when we get back to sort of the thing that you were talking about, the shame, the difficulty with that is like innately, no, I don't think we feel shame around sexuality. But what happens is it's the societal messaging and things that we get while we're growing up. And so like, you know, Sam had said, like, you know, one of the things I often share is in my 14 years of practice, I have had 3 people come in with healthy, positive sexual messaging. Most of us get messages that it is shameful or dirty, or you shouldn't be engaging in it, or you shouldn't be talking about it. It's embarrassing. It's uncomfortable. It's this thing. And so I think the hard thing is too, is like when we're, especially sort of like in American society in particular, the foundation of this country is puritanical, whether we like to think about it or not. And so like a lot of that sets the framework. It was really interesting. Like I was recently taking just a course on, you know, sacred sensuality and like just the ability to even receive pleasure, and like how a lot of the messaging we get in the United States about pleasure is like too much pleasure is a bad thing. It's work hard, push yourself to the extreme. Like we're not really taught to really have pleasure and to feel shame sometimes if we have too much pleasure. And that's not just sex. That's like food and everything else we do too. That's complex.
I promise I'm going to get to Enneagram, but can you define healthy messaging when it comes to sexuality?
I mean, you know, I'll have Sam add some things here as well, but like when you're a child, it's sort of that ability to like call body parts by what they are. When your children ask, if you see a child sort of engaging in self-pleasure, it's like, you know, like even with my own children, I'll say like, hey, I get that feels really good and that you're enjoying what you're doing, but that's something that we do when we're in the privacy of our own bedroom. Or when my kids used to like take baths together, I'd be like, okay, like you and your sister's in here, that's not something that we can do. But if you want to take baths by yourself and not have your sister in there with you, you can definitely have that. You can do as much exploration around your own body that you would like. And he would actually ask for that. He'd be like, okay, I want to take a bath by myself. You know, little least, I want to take a bath by myself. I want my sister in there with me today. And then we just like would teach them about like, you know, sexual boundaries and keeping the door shut. But it's just that ability to kind of like, we know like, and I'm not a sex educator, right? There are people that actually specialize in this as well. But the more you call body parts by what they are, the more you talk about like pleasure is an okay thing to have, you know, and even like, I've got a son who calls me cringe now because I talk too much about sex and puberty with him because he's 10 years old now. And so like, and I'm like, hey, buddy, I just want you to be well informed. But the interesting thing even with him is like, he says that, but then when he has questions about things, he just comes up and asks me the questions. And he said to me the other day, Mom, what I love is I can just come and ask you these questions. Like, you don't seem like you're uncomfortable with it. Like, you just talk to me about it. Like, and that's like a very shiny moment of parenting. He tells me I'm cringe many times when I talk about this stuff. But it's like, to me, that's what we're doing, right? Like having those conversations as the child is asking for it. Sometimes people share too much information too early too, but it's kind of guiding, your child will guide you. And it's just being open to having that conversation around sex. And the more you have those conversations candidly with them and answer their questions as they have them, the more you're going to, and you talk to obviously it's just talking about sex, I guess, is the gist of it. What would you add, Sam?
Talking about it without your own hangups and your own shame and your own enculturation impacting it. So let's say that you have your own shame around sexuality, you're trying to be different for your children or whatever, but they can see that you're tensed up, you're really stressed about it. They're still going to internalize shame because they're like, oh, my parent seems upset. Well, they're educating me. So it's even the subtleties there. And the only thing I would add to the examples Lyndsey was giving would be the less that people are masking things in mystery when their children ask where babies come from, when their children ask about menstruation, and they're just like, that's not for you to know about, that's for grown-ups. That's what creates some of the shame because children are naturally curious. And like Lyndsey said, you can follow their lead. But what happened to a lot of us and what we do a lot to our children is either just push them away from it until they're older and then they get the message something's wrong here, like me asking this was wrong, or we try but we're really uncomfortable and they can tell we're really uncomfortable. So, to your original point about healthy positive messaging, I think it has to do with allowing curiosity, allowing self-pleasure, supporting it, not just allowing it, not just not saying don't do that, but just saying like, okay, that's so great. Like, just like going to the bathroom, we want to do that by ourselves, but that's so great that you're doing that. And just supporting the natural curiosity we have about our bodies and sexuality as human beings, I think sort of a really long answer to what healthy sexual messaging is.
That's perfect. Let's do transition to Enneagram. I imagine motive's going to color, as you have said, quite a bit of our sexual experience in terms of what we want to get out of sex. Motive is going to color that. So we were talking offline about just picking a couple of pairs, going for depth. Like, what would you want to talk about when like this number and this number come in? So what's your first pairing?
I think we got to talk about a 9 and an 8.
Which are actually way more common than I think a lot of us would assume. I know 3 9-8 couples. So you find out that somebody's a 9 and an 8. How does that inform some of what you would want to communicate to these two?
Sure. So 3 of the things that I found in my research that type impacts. One of those would be overall sexual desire, partnered sexual desire. So the level of desire people say that they have for partnered sex. We always caution that often has to do with actualizing desire is a complicating factor there. So people are reporting, in my study, people are reporting how often they would like to be sexual with a partner, not necessarily how often they are. And those are different. But it impacts, type impacts and sort of predicts overall sexual desire, sexual assertiveness level, which is going to come in there for how we can actualize our desire, and then sexual desire cues, meaning the types of things that lead us to feeling desire. So there's a bunch more things too Lyndsey can talk about from the therapeutic angle. But for a 9 and an 8, the primary difference that's going to be between those two is sexual assertiveness, which you might predict. Mm-hmm. So our 8s are going to be by far reporting highest overall sexual desire, highest overall sexual assertiveness. They have the easiest time saying what they want. They prefer explicit erotic desire cues, that is to say things that are very explicitly sexual. So there's a whole 4 different types of desire cues. I won't go into like all the details, but there's a lot more subtle ones, like, dancing closely or whispering in the ear. Eights are like, no, tell me you want to have sex with me. That's what's hot, right? So eights are really, really, really direct and really, I'm gonna say, obvious with
May I
their
clarify?
style.
Are
Mhm.
you saying that this is what eights desire from their partner, or you're saying this is what eights commonly offer, or is it both?
Both.
Right. Perfect. Thank you.
So what I mean in terms of how I measured it is that that's what turns an eight on,
Yeah.
is this explicit approach. But because we actually tend to treat others the way we want to be treated, that is also how they tend to come on to their partner or to others. So that's the picture of the eight. And then the picture of the nine, and I'll have Lyndsey talk about nines too, because she's a nine herself. But nines are almost the opposite. So nines are by far the lowest sexual assertiveness in terms of feeling comfortable. Say, for example, do you feel comfortable telling your partner what you like? Do you feel comfortable telling your partner to stop something that you do not like? Do you feel comfortable asking for more of what you do like? Nines are saying no to all of that. They really don't feel comfortable with this type of explicit communication about sex. They are going to use much more subtle come ons, much more subtle cues, and they're going to prefer oftentimes like a gentler approach and gentler types of touch, whereas eights are going to be firmer touch and more intense touch. So with an 8 and 9 couple, often what will happen is that the eight is like, I'm asking and asking them what they want me to do, and they're not answering. And I don't understand. Like, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. I'm asking them. And they're just saying nothing, or saying, oh, I'm not sure, or saying whatever you want is fine. So that would be a common presenting issue, I'd say, for an 8-9 couple, is that the way that the assertiveness meets. And then relatedly, with initiating sex, the eight's often going to be like, well, they never initiate sex ever. Like, it's always me. And the nine is, that may be true, because the nine may not need to, because the eights have high desire and are initiating a lot. Or they sometimes say, actually, I am initiating, but my way of initiating is like this gentle touch on your back that you think is nothing. So I'd say those are some of the things that would come up with an 8-9 couple. I love to hear what Lyndsey has to add, because we've both seen these couples.
Love that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's some of the things that definitely the things that you're saying, right? There's that frustration about passiveness. And sometimes, like, interestingly enough, like the relational component is sometimes eights just say things really blunt, sometimes in a way that can be painful, even though it's not intentional. And one of the patterns that I have seen with nines is sometimes if I'm angry with you, which they're more passive and withdrawns, they're not necessarily telling you, but they can almost actually be like withholding of sex. So like if I'm angry with you, but I'm not really telling you that because, I'm an average health 9, or I don't know how to tell you that, I might choose not to be sexual with you right now because I'm feeling frustrated and anger with you. Interestingly, too, I think another thing with the 9s that I see is like, every other type when we're working with them, we're really asking them to merge more with their partner, to like let go. We know that sex, is the actual experience of sex is the best when all of us can sort of let go within the experience and kind of be in more of that connection with the partner and just kind of be present in the moment. But what happens with 9s is that they just completely merge with their partner and they lose their own identity even in the sexual experience. So they actually need to maintain some autonomy and keep some of themselves sort of within those experiences that they're having as well. It's interesting when you talk about the subtle initiation stuff. Like I'm in relationship with a 5, but it's sort of the same thing. It's like I do very subtle ways to sort of initiate sex. So it's like I'm grabbing your arm, I'm rubbing it, I'm doing like some types just do not pick up on that type of an initiation, but it's the most comfortable, I think, for 9s to sort of be in that initiation place, or letting you know that they have interest. Most 9s do not know what they like or want. So when you ask them that question, they're like, I don't even know. I mean, that's a huge that's huge work that I do. So like when I'm oftentimes working with a 9/8 couple, we're going to be doing a combination definitely of individual and couple sessions, because I think some of the self work that nines really need to do is to discover what they like, want, and desire, because they will oftentimes, they follow their partner's lead. They're very adventurous partners. They're willing to go wherever their partners want to go, but they're looking to the partner to make that initiation towards what that looks like. And so when you ask them what they like, which I know is frustrating for a lot of people that are paired with nines, they don't actually know. And that's been huge in the therapeutic practice, because people are like, oh, like, I just thought you weren't sharing with me. Like, everybody has fantasies and things that they like and that they want. And it's like, well, until nines have done some work on themselves, they sometimes actually don't know. And interestingly enough, like, I find like even just do that sexual work, like of knowing yourself and knowing what you like or want, will translate to other work. Like all of a sudden, like now I know other things that I like and want. You know, your gut, oftentimes for nines, your gut's telling you, but you turn it off all the time and you ignore it. And I could go on and on about that too.
If I was making guesses about eights and nines, I would imagine eights and nines initially are going to have a lot of chemistry. The 9 wants their presence to matter, and the 8 pursues. And though that combination, I imagine, would have a magnetic element to it, especially because the 8 doesn't want to be vulnerable and isn't telling anyone this. But 9s create fantastic realms for 8s to exist in and not feel vulnerable. More than that, what I see with body types is that they are respecters of one another's agency, and this comes across very intuitively.
Yeah, I think that's close. I think sometimes we can see with nines, especially sexual nines, who have so much merging that they sometimes have like, sort of no sense of self at all, that if someone actively pursues them, they end up with that person, like you said, because they were in inertia. So like they weren't going to go and pursue anyone, even if maybe they wanted a relationship. So you can see that type of dynamic. Lyndsey, do you have anything to add?
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the things that just is worth noting, period, is that like the first 9 months to a year and a half, there is going to be a ton of chemistry and a ton of like passion, excitement, and desire, no matter what the Enneagram type pairing is, because you have this production. It's oxytocin, dopamine. Is it neuropinephrine too? I always forget the third chemical. I think it's neuropinephrine. But there's these chemicals that your body actually produces at higher levels. So it's like we would see high chemistry with everyone based on type pretty quickly. And then what you're going to see is like who they really are as far as desire patterns and levels will emerge at the 9 months to year and a half part. And that's where you get this bait and switch kind of experience too. So I think that's an interesting kind of thing to like highlight as well.
I just thought of something else I wanted to add about this pairing, which is that nines are quite focused on their partner's pleasure. Twos are overall the type that's the absolute most focused on their partner's pleasure, as you could imagine. But nines are a close second. And eights are up there with sevens in being focused on their own pleasure, with sevens being the one that's most focused on their own pleasure, followed by eights. That doesn't mean they don't care about their partner's pleasure, but they're quite aware of their own pleasure and that it's central. So one of the 8-9 dynamics as well is that the 9 is sort of happy centering the 8's pleasure, and the 8 is sort of happy with their pleasure being centered. And years can go by before the 9 might realize they aren't loving that. And when it's brought up, the 8's kind of like, why didn't you say something immediately? You know, because the 8 would speak up immediately.
Is there a flip side to that? I assume that there is something about human sexuality that is not only about one's own pleasure, but the ability to provide for the one in front of you. I imagine that eights might have that gear as well, where they would intuitively know whether or not they are serving. In fact, because they would be like their security move to 2, I would imagine would awaken some of that as well. As that, would that also come into play?
They can be 8s. I think one of what supports them in that is how confident they are and how willing they are to try things. So
Yes.
a lot of types and a lot of people just have hang-ups in bed where they feel like, I don't want to try this because it might upset the person or they might not like it. 8s are kind of like, I have an intuition, I'm just going to go for it. And if they don't like it, they'll tell me. course, that can get them into trouble if they're with a type that's not comfortable saying that they don't like something, but that does support them in discovering, the giving that that partner receives best, I guess, if that makes sense.
Boom. Further thoughts on that?
I mean, I was going to
Lyndsey?
say, like, one of the things, yes, but also, like, when we have this dynamic of the 9 or 8, one of the things I do see with 8s in sexuality too is, like, they can be, focused on the other person's pleasure or taking charge or initiation or being in charge of that sexual experience. And really, a lot of them really desire actually for someone else to take that lead or to take that place. It's like the one place that they can, it's the same thing with 1s actually. Sex is like one of the places they actually let go and they're very adventurous. This is sort of the place that 8s also want to like let go and like be taken care of. And so you can see more tenderness in ways, which can also be really vulnerable for them and difficult for them because you can see this more vulnerable side of them they oftentimes will protect. It will come out in sex. And so they are desperately sort of what I find wanting someone else to kind of take charge and be in charge of the sexual realm. They'll do it if they have to, and they know what to do, and they're really good at it, but they love it when someone else does.
I would love to push into that a little bit because my gut would be something like when you have a couple that's 8 and 9, when they're really connected and truly intimate and very secure with one another, they will move into their security move. Would that not be part of this as well? And I don't know how you think through that in terms of sexuality, but what comes to your mind?
I would say that in the couples that I have seen, like a full move to the security point, it's not that common. And because sexuality is the place where it's definitely possible and you definitely see it, but it's the place where we have where people tend to do the least work on themselves, where we have all of our shadow stuff culturally and individually. So to get to a place where you're so healthy and open and self-accepting that you both would move to your security point at once, I would say I wouldn't see it as commonly.
I think it's a great word. As you say it, I'm like, yes, of course, that's how that works. I believe we said 6s and 4s is going to be our next one. Do you see a lot of 6-4 pairings?
I do. I don't know if Sam does.
I have a theory about why this would be interesting. Like, why is it the case that this particular combination is the one seeking some feedback and help on these fronts? But let's talk about.
Do you want to give your speculation, and I can let you know whether you're right or not? It'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, I think 6s and 4s and 8s are the most likely to solve their problems emotionally with action and to set aside thinking for a minute and just engage something. 4s and 6s are going to be the reactive type, and so they may be the one initiating and saying, here's a problem, we need to do something about it, and seeking help, feedback, insights. That's going to be in the wheelhouse for 6s. I imagine 4s might be a little bit more comfortable with that as well. And so I know of just one 6-4 couple in my experience, but that doesn't mean that they're out there. But that would be, I'm shooting from the hip on some of this, but that's where I would start. What you think?
Well, so typically actually what I see, so we'll just talk a little bit about what 6s are looking for in sexuality and sort of what I see in the therapeutic office, and I'll have Sam kind of add in sort of the research aspects that she saw as well. But one of the things that I see with 6s in particular is that they need to be really prepared for what to expect during sex. And so like that reactive piece that you're talking about, Jeff, is that like when something is sprung on them sexually, you will get a reaction and it can be a pretty severe, like, what are you doing? I can't believe you tried to do that. Like that, because they weren't expecting that or anticipating that, or that wasn't part of what they had in the plan. And so it can be hard because 6s sort of need to be prepared and planned for like what sex is going to look like. Not in the sense of like, they can benefit from like, yes, we're going to be, I always call the sensual romantic connective day where like we're going to be sexual. They can benefit from that, but some of it's just knowing what to anticipate or expect. So you want to be able to have conversations ahead of time with people that are 6s. Like if you want to try a new type of sexual behavior, if you want to talk about the things that you really enjoy or like or want, like it's always better to have had that conversation ahead of time with them, so that then And they're willing to, I mean, the thing I love about sixes that I think was not anticipated or expected is like they're pretty open to a lot of things as long as they know what to expect and where you want to go. So if I'm prepared for whatever sexual behavior or act that you want to do, whether it's something kind of out of the ordinary, a little bit more kinky, like they're pretty open to it if they know what it is. But if you spring it on in the moment, like, you know, Sam was saying with the 8, right? Like, oh, sometimes I just have intuition. It's like, that intuition could get you in trouble in a relationship with the 6. If you just tried something, they might actually like it. But if you just tried it with them and didn't have a conversation ahead of time, it's probably not going to go very well. So a lot of times when I'm working with 6s is that, you know, sometimes I will even like, this actually is a 6-4 pairing, but like one of the things that she was doing, she was the 6, he was the 4, was planning for when there could be spontaneous sexual experiences, because 4s, on the other hand, don't like things to be contrived. They want it more sensuality, more spontaneity, right, more in the moment of where we're feeling and going with the experience, sort of within that. But she would like look at the week and be like, okay, Tuesday, I'm going to get into the shower with him when he's showering, and I'm going to create the sexual energy to get myself to do that. And so it was a very successful intervention sort of and I've used it many times since this first client did that, is that in the sense of like, then she can be prepared for what's going to happen and create that sexual energy within herself and be present. On the other end of that, the moodiness of 4s can really set off the sexual desire for 6s, because 6s are constantly like, if there's moodiness in the 4, and, you know, 4s, they don't have a problem sort of being in more of what those, you know, what I would call more melancholic, depressed, darker emotions. They actually like it sometimes. I find a lot of my 4s actually enjoy being there. But when he, like with this particular couple, or what I've seen with other 4, actually I have another 4, it's a 4-9 couple too. When that moodiness or that low, like they like, did I do something? Are you angry at me? They get more anxious. They get more worried. They try to like do what I would say like is more like trying to like boost the mood, and that gets more frustration in the 4. So I'm talking about more of the relationship dynamics, you know, kind of impact the sexual relationship. So then like she doesn't want, like then she's not, you know, like, so then the sex gets thrown off because they've got this dynamic and avoidance of him or walking on eggshells to kind of stay away from that. And so like even in that intervention, like typically what I'll do is like the 4 has the right to have whatever emotional experience that they're having. And if they're not going to tell you that they're upset or frustrated with, like, it's like working on emotional boundaries, but it's like, if they're not going to tell you that they're frustrated or upset with you, which sometimes they don't because they're withdrawal types, that's on them. That's not on you. It's not your job to figure out what's going on and having more of that emotional boundaries. If you can't handle being in the same room as the person that's having that emotional, like you can remove yourself, you can go to a space to create your own, you know, reassurance, security, or safety, or if you're a 9, your own peace or calmness, right? And then come back. Like they get to have a right to have their emotion, and you get to decide whether you want to be in that space or not while they're doing it. Like you get to have kind of that. I'm thinking of like the you know, the thing is like one's a like when the 2 couples I'm talking about, one's a sexual 4 and one's a self-preservation 4. The sexual 4s can be a little bit more, I don't even know what the right word is, but they got a sting to them. You know, and there'd be this sting, and then that sting is there, and then there's that backing off. And the self-preservation 4s are more like, which we're not talking about instincts today, but I think it's good to kind of point out the little bit of the difference there. More brooding internal, so like feeling of the lower emotion, not that kind of like attacking or stinging of the emotion. But both of those, like in that particular, even a 9 or a 6 is going to have a big reaction to that as well.
Love that. You have anything to add there, Sam?
Yes, lots of things. So to add on for 6s, they are also very low sexual assertiveness along with 9s. There's a lot of fear of rejection that comes there. So that comes up because 4s are quite assertive, not as assertive as an 8 or 7, but up there, basically third along with 8 and 7. So the 4 is going to be more sexually assertive. The 6 is the desire cues that work for 6s are called emotional bonding cues. So they're the cues like we're talking about our future together. I'm feeling a sense of safety and security with my partner. I feel seen. You know, we're we're talking about our commitment to each other. I feel committed to. All of those things are helping. And these aren't, by the way, not just things that sixes like. These are things that actually make sixes feel turned on.
Right.
When they feel those things happen and they feel safe, they're like, wow, like, my sexual desire is really flowing. So I'll say that about sixes. And that fours, another thing about them is that they tend to be into more of the alternative sexualities. I think because if they're inclined in that way at all, fours are happy to be different. They're happy to go against the grain. So they really embrace it. And like Lyndsey said, you might initially think, well, the six is going to be really vanilla. But to the contrary, I actually will tell people six is sometimes the best partner someone with a particular offbeat kink or fetish or sexual interest can have. Because if you sit down and say, like, here's what I like to do, like, are you open to that? Sixes are so good at supporting alternative sexualities, but they absolutely do need everything Lyndsey said. They need to be prepared, have the buy-in, everything like that. But I actually do think sixes are the best of the types for supporting a partner with alternative sexuality. So in that way, fours and six actually a good match.
Oh, that's perfect. The thing that I would guess on a lot of these fronts with the 4-6 pairing is that a lot of their sex life will begin with the pulling of the 4 of the 6 into their emotional life. I would assume that that would be a primary, similar to the 8-9 experience, that's probably going to, the beginning and a lot of the energy will be coming from the 8's engagement. Am I wrong in thinking that? Or is it reciprocated? Like, here would be a question, like, it sounds like there may be work to be done if the 6 isn't the one initiating or the 9 isn't the one initiating. That was some of the language that I heard. But isn't it the case that sometimes the chemistries that we all kind of fall into really is where we prefer a partner who does a complementary thing to what we naturally do given our type? You see where I'm going there?
I mean, I think what you're talking about, I mean, honestly, especially if you've got like sexual instinct and even a social 4, they actually might be more of the initiator of what's going on sexually within the relationship, because they're going to be having the higher desire. Self-preservation 4s will look a little different.
Yeah.
Sometimes this is why I'm mentioning instinct, because sometimes instinct will look a little bit different. And like in my 9-4 couple, it's actually the 9 that's the one trying to pull which is a social dominant, pull the 4 into wanting to be more sexual. But like also like what I think the definition of sexuality here is kind of a big thing as well, because it is for 4s in particular, what you're going to see is it's actually more about what happens before sex than what it is actually about the act of sex. So that's that longing, that engagement of that kind of, it's not like traditional romance, but it's romance. I don't really necessarily how to describe it, because it's not what we would think of as like candlelight dinners and stuff like this, but they want deep connection, sensual connection. They want this depth of exchanging of souls, and no matter what type you have. But honestly, like 4s are the ones kind of guiding the sexual relationship, because they're like, from Sam's research, which maybe she's talked about before, but you kind of have that sexual triad, which is the 7, 8, and 4, and the 6s are kind of at, I mean, they could be the bottom sexual assertive triad with 9s and 5s, right? Kind of at the bottom there. I think I got that right. Is it 9s and 5s? And, and 6s. So like you've got kind of this dichotomy too, where we have more like higher actualization of desire person with a lower actualization of desire person. Though in everyday life, what you're talking about, Jeff, is true. She's the one, they're oftentimes the one initiating, planning the trips, getting the things done, like the 6 is the one that's like really like in charge in the other aspects of life, but not in the sexual realm.
I may have said it backwards. My assumption is the 4 is the initiator. Let me recast it. My assumption is that the 4 is the one who is pulling the 6 into emotion, and that's something that the 6 would, if they're attracted to a 4s, are going to be highly desirous of. That this person draws me into this rich emotional experience, and that's where the connection comes. Similarly to the 8 and 9, But so I suppose I was floating that. That seems like a dynamic, a natural dynamic of the chemistry of the types. There's nothing wrong, obviously, with like flipping roles or like the 9 initiating for the 8 or the 6 initiating for the 4. My assumption is that that just wouldn't be as common.
I think sixes and nines struggle to initiate, or at least struggle. Their partners think that they struggle to initiate, because with nines, again, you do have these
Yeah,
subtle
yeah, yeah.
initiations. Sixes are going to be the least likely type of any type to initiate sex because of the, in general, I mean, there's always exceptions, but because of the rejection sensitivity and the rejection fear. I'd say it's the rejection fear more than sensitivity, and the tendency of sixes to prefer like the devil they know to the one they don't.
Right. I would love to bring in gender for a second on these fronts. I imagine, especially in a culture like ours, that if you have a 9 male paired with a female 6, or if you have a 6 male paired with a female 4, there's a lot of cultural expectations that males are the ones that initiate. Could you speak to gender in these dynamics?
One thing that I'll say is what people think is happening and what is actually happening are totally different. So, um, in in my coaching practice and in, I think, Lyndsey, in your therapy practice, like a desire discrepancy is just as likely to be the male with the lower desire. But
Hmm.
in our culturated ideas about gender and gender roles and sexual roles, the idea is that it's mostly going to be, the male with the higher desire, but that doesn't play out. I know, Lyndsey, you probably speak more to this.
Yeah, I think what is interesting because of the societal messaging around sex is there's more permission if you're a woman to be the lower sex desire partner. And so if men are, or if they're having performance issues, because sometimes what you can see is there is this thing about your masculinity is wrapped up in your sexuality in a way that is not true for women. And so for men, if there's like even just dysfunction issues going on, so like maybe I can't maintain an erection the way that I'd like to, I might just avoid sex. So it can look like a sexual desire issue, low sexual desire issue. Or there are a lot of men that actually are the lower sexual desire partner. An Enneagram type and instinct will actually reflect oftentimes what's kind of happening. It's interesting, even with my same sex couples that come in, I always have one person that's like the higher desire partner and one that's the lower desire partner, and and all of that is, I mean, and I joke that people that are exactly the same are just not coming into my office, right, because they don't need my services. But it plays out, it plays out in the same sex relationships as well, kind of this desire discrepancy, which oftentimes you can come back to Enneagram type and instinct giving you the answers of why that's occurring. But men aren't going to talk about it. Men suffer in silence. I really think we have a lot of work to do on men's sexuality still, in the sense of like, men don't talk to their friends, men don't tell other people, like even men won't seek out oftentimes male sex therapists because they don't want to tell another man that any sexual issue is happening or occurring. They seek me out intentionally because I'm a woman, even when I don't have the body parts and can't fully understand, what their experience is like with that. And so it's hidden, it's not spoken, where women will oftentimes, they're talking to their friends, they have support of their friends, they may not know what to do or how to navigate it, and it can happen in some unhealthy ways when we're talking to our friends about what's going on. But even in that situation, sometimes when people have the higher desire partner, like there can be difficulty talking with your friends when you are a woman and you're having that struggle. So I think it's surprisingly, there's a high, I mean, I wouldn't say it's 50-50. It's probably 60-40 if I were to take a percentage where it's women are the lower desire partner and the men, but it's a lot higher than you would ever imagine.
Can I clarify something on higher? Like, will you see with these two couples? Will you see the higher desire partner ever being the 9 and the lower desire partner being the 8, or the higher desire partner being the 6, lower desire being the 4?
I can speak to that for a second. So, in general, these are obviously trends and patterns, and patterns that are supported by the research and by the therapy practice. But instinct is really going to play a role. So,
Ah, sure.
for example, I have it's not a 9-8 couple, but I have a 9-4 couple. And fours are, generally would be the higher desire. And so four male would generally be predicted to be the high desire, but because we have a sexual 9 and a self-preservation 4, in fact, the female 9 is the higher
Yeah,
partner. So you do get all kinds of exceptions to these patterns.
it's a good word.
I was going to say ditto, Sam. The couple that I have is the same thing. It's a self-preservation 4 with a sexual 9 or social sexual 9. Yeah.
Do you know that fertility is comes from the Latin word for strength? It's the same word that we get virtue from. It's like human excellence. It comes from these strengths that you have. So if you have fertility, then clearly you're strong. We've woven into the language itself, as you're talking about men and struggles, like woven into the language itself is some problems. You see this across the board in terms of human language and how it can box people in, but I think that's fun. Anything else worth saying that we kind of missed when hitting these two couples?
Can't think of anything.
Yeah, I can't think of anything. I mean, I think one thing to kind of leave with which I think we've already said in this is like, oftentimes what presents as a low desire issue is actually an actualization of desire issue. That's been a really big thing. Like even, like there's even a diagnosis for low sexual desire, which rarely do I ever give that diagnosis, for clients and things like that. And so just remembering that, like sometimes it isn't actually about your partner not desiring or wanting you. It's more about having the difficulty actualizing their desire for you.
That's a good word. Last word to say?
And just that's also traceable to type. So, and instinct for sure. So, for example, like 8s and 4s in our examples would be able to actualize a desire that they feel without a lot of trouble, depending on other factors. Whereas 9s and 6s might feel it, but be kind of stopped by, in 6's case, a fear of rejection, and a 9's case of inability to, grasp their desire enough to express it in words, and also the 9's tendency to be very nonverbal.
I'm committed to the idea that the most powerful thing you can say to your partner isn't "I love you." The most powerful thing you can say is "This is what I want." The thing about Enneagram is it exposes that at some depthy levels that I haven't experienced any other tool that can get into those spaces. When talking about sexuality, that's I suppose where my mind goes, and I would start just having seen the places you all go, specifically with instincts, but with the overlap of type. That strikes me as like one of the best possible roads one can begin to go down if struggling in these spaces. And so cheering for you, cheering for your work. I find it very important and helpful, and I'm wishing you guys all the success in the world on it. If folks want to get in touch, by the way, with said work, what are you up to?
So we talked about type this time because we've both spoken with you about instincts before, but I'll just say if someone's only listening to this episode that Enneagram instinct plays such a huge role in sexuality, that's often what we talk about first. And so something we're really interested in right now is the repressed instinct, actually. So the idea that you have a dominant instinct, but then you also have a repressed one that doesn't come easily to you, or sort of you're in your shadow, your blind spot, that has an impact on sexuality as well. So if folks have paid attention to our other work on type and instinct, we're going to this new layer of the impact of the repressed instinct on sexuality. We're really interested in that right now. We're doing a couple of free episodes on our Instagram live series on that in the fall. And then we also have a training coming up in the fall on the repressed instinct and sexuality. So that's what we're loving to talk about and look into right now.
Anything to add to that, Lyndsey?
No, I think just kind of what, Sam is saying, like we have that repressed instinct coming up. And we also offer like a little bit of like a freebies, like our little desire. What is it? What do we call it?
It's a type and desire guide. I don't remember the exact name. But...
Yeah, we have a type and desire guide that we also offer people. So you just get a little bit more information if you're kind of curious about that. And we also have like our flagship course that is now self-paced as well. So if you really want to get all of this information around Enneagram and instincts and how to apply it to your therapeutic work, or your personal life. The nice thing that we did with that particular training is we have a track for both. So if you're a therapist, there's information, and then there's a track for personal growth. So all the information that you learn in the beginning is for everyone, and then we have particular tracks for self-growth or for therapists that want to use it in their practice. I was going to say, like, one thing that's been huge, as I talked about before, I started as a therapist before I used the Enneagram, and I was a sex therapist before I used the Enneagram too. And like having this particular tool in my office, using the Enneagram and the instincts and type, like clients have so much more progress, so much more quickly, so much more generosity, so much more understanding for each other. It's been a really huge tool that I kind of wish I had gotten when I was becoming a sex therapist, because I noticed, and I use a lot of other sex therapy techniques too, but this one in particular helped clients have better understanding for who they were and actually have better progress in therapy. And I imagine for your coaching as well, Sam.
Absolutely.
It's an excellent word. She's Lyndsey Fraser. She's Dr. Sammy Greenberg. Their Instagram presence is phenomenal, a wealth of information there and all the links to what they're doing. I'm going to put the links to our other conversations in the show notes. So friends, if you would like to hear work that we've done in the past, we've already had 3 or so hours of conversation. Sam and I have talked quite a bit about philosophy and science as well. The hitting Enneagram and its overlap with empirical study is, I think, the future for a lot of us for Enneagram work and where it really matters. And so you're grabbing hold of a specific subject topic, going for depth, I think is one of the best possible things that can happen right now. So again, cheering for your work. Always grateful for your time, and looking forward to talking to y'all again in the future.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.